GPT 5.1 just got released and I've been testing it out across multiple different workflows, and straight away you can feel that it's different. This release isn't really about massive new skills or a giant leap forward in performance, but it's all about the personality of ChatGPT and the outputs that we're going to get. The other side of that as well is it's even more personalizable than ever before. In this video, we're going to cover what's new with ChatGPT 5.1, how you can turn on personalization. We're going to put it to the test for GPT-5 versus ChatGPT 5.1 with 3 different complex tests. And we're going to talk about who ChatGPT 5.1 is really for. So by the end of this, you'll be able to see how ChatGPT 5.1 really does compare to ChatGPT 5. So let's jump straight in and see how it performs. So what's new? Well, we've now got a more conversational style agent back to the days of ChatGPT 4.0, which felt a lot more human versus the ChatGPT 5 that got released earlier this year. We've now got an Insta model for 5.1, which is going to be warmer, more intelligent, and better at following instructions. And quite noticeably better is the ChatGPT 5.1 thinking model. This is now their more advanced reasoning model, which is easier to understand and faster on simple tasks, but more persistent on those complex ones. So it's really able to get to that end result and give you that best response back as quickly as possible. As we can see here, they run through a few quick examples and they show you the difference between the more warm and conversational approach of ChatGPT 5.1. We're going to touch on that later on though, and it covers more details in here as well as the performance. One thing that was really interesting with this is there wasn't that many benchmark scores that were actually provided for ChatGPT 5.1 versus ChatGPT 5 that was released earlier this year. So it will be really interesting to see how that performance actually stacks up as millions of people get their hands on these models and third-party platforms like artificial analysis AI start to do their real in-depth analysis on how it performs. As we can see here, there are some tasks where it's significantly better, but for most of you day to day, you probably won't notice a huge difference. If we come down here, as you can see, they've got some examples of that reasoning, and now we can see the personalization, which we're going to touch on. So to access this, what we're going to do is come across to ChatGPT. We're going to first touch on the personalization. So if we open up our settings in here, what we'll be able to see is they've now got new personalities they were able to include. So if we do default, as we can see here, we've now got professional, friendly, candid, quirky, efficient, nerdy, and cynical. Personally, I prefer using something more like candid because otherwise sometimes ChatGPT can just ramble on and on and on when we want a sharper, direct response back for the information we actually need. So how do we access this new model? Well, when you come up to the top, you can click on where it says ChatGPT. It's now automatically going to go to 5.1, and you can decide whether you want it to be auto, where it decides whether it wants to use instant or that thinking reasoning model to be able to give you that response back. You'll also still be able to access those legacy models down the bottom here if you want to go through and again do some testing yourself or find the performance that's optimal for you. So now let's run through 3 examples. The first one we're going to do is all around a multi-step task. We've asked ChatGPT 5 on the left and 5.1 on the right to go through and complete the specific task. Read the following paragraph. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping how individuals work, learn, and create. The biggest unlock is no longer automation, but intelligent collaboration between humans and models. Summarize it in exactly 2 bullet points for step 2. For step 3, we're going to say extract 5 key themes and put them into a 2-column table labeled theme and why it matters. Step 4, we're going to do rewrite the summary into a tone which is confident, clear, and practical. Step 5, we're going to turn that into a 30-second YouTube hook. Step 6, we're going to suggest 3 ideas for improving the original paragraph. And step 7, we're going to finally get a 1-sentence metaphor that we can summarize for the overall message. What's really interesting straight away is how the different models have actually gone through and thought about the response. So it took 17 seconds for ChatGPT 5 to think through that response, whereas it only took 10 seconds for 5.1 thinking. The other side is we've actually got a re-bullet point list. So for example, this one starts at 1, whereas the ChatGPT 5.1, really interestingly, actually matches up exactly for starting with 2, assuming that you understand it's done option 1. So it's really interesting to see how that's changed. The next and biggest important change is again that wording for the response. What you'll notice straight away is that the table alone is a lot clearer to understand compared to the one on the left-hand side here with ChatGPT 5. The reason for this is because we can easily understand the creativity one, for example, shows that AI can expand, not replace, human imagination and output. Whereas on the left-hand side here, we don't really have it as clearly defined on the left-hand side for theme, but even when we come to the right for why it matters, redesigns workflows, curricula, and creative processes for greater output or greater impact. What does that mean? It doesn't really give us an actual output compared to 5.1 for that response that we got back. Second, and more noticeable, is if we come down to that YouTube hook. I think the one that we've got for ChatGPT 5.1 is actually more energetic, and the tone sounds a lot more natural than the other one here. For example, forget AI will replace you. The real shift is smarter AI becomes your co-pilot. In the next 30 seconds, I'll show you how to turn models into a teammate that drafts first passes, test ideas, and pressure checks your thinking. Versus the other one, if you're still thinking AI is just about automation, you're already behind. The real edge is knowing how to work with AI like a partner, using it to sharpen your thinking, speed up decisions, and level up what you deliver every single day. Now, again, you may have a preference and say that you prefer ChatGPT 5, but I think that 5.1 is much better for the energy and being clearer for the output. If we then come down to the last part here, one thing that's really interesting is the metaphor, because at a quick glance, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference. But when you read it properly, it's actually a lot warmer and relatable for that second one versus the one from ChatGPT 5. So from ChatGPT 5, AI is no longer the factory robot on the line, it's the skilled co-pilot helping you chart the course and fly the planes. Whereas 5.1, AI is no longer a power tool on the bench, it's a skilled co-worker at your side, helping you get better work done. Again, slight tweaking more of that phrasing and personality, which just makes 5.1 sound a bit more human and warmer versus ChatGPT 5. Next, we're going to come through to demo 2. In this one, we were trying to do a reasoning challenge to make sure that we get the best and, more importantly, the correct output from each model. So we gave it the task of answering the following questions. Do not answer immediately, think through the steps carefully. A farmer has 17 sheep, but all 9 run away. 3 new sheep arrive and 2 are sold. Next, the farmer builds 4 equal-sized pens. How many sheep go into each pen and why? Please show your reasoning step by step, then give the final answer at the end. So that's invoking our chain of thought reasoning of how we're going to get to the output. Now, if we compare the responses that we got back, I actually prefer the structure of ChatGPT 5, where it says step 1, I did this, step 2, I did this, step 3, and so on and so forth. Versus on the right hand side here, it's not giving us as good of a structure for 5.1 instant that we got back. This could just be because more of that candid setting I've turned on, but I really think that step-by-step instruction is definitely easier for us to follow the logic. Unfortunately, ChatGPT 5 instant did actually come back with the incorrect answer. What we're looking for is 3 sheep to go into 1 pen, 3 sheep to go into another pen, 2 sheep to go in 1 pen, and 2 sheep to go into another pen. So then we've got 6 sheep in one part, and we've got 4 sheep in the other, giving us our total 10 sheep in the output. I think both of them have actually done a pretty bad job at explaining that in a really simplistic way. On the left, it's actually got the answer wrong with ChatGPT 5 Instant. It's going to say that we're going to have 4 pens, and then we're going to try and divide that by the 10 sheep that we've got. So that means it's looking at 2.5 sheep per pen. So of course that's incorrect, because we can't have 2 sheep in 4 pens with 2 sheep left over. They all need to go into an actual pen. So that's where with ChatGPT 5 Instant, it did actually get the answer right with 3 in one pen, 3 in the next pen, then 2 in that pen, and then 2 again. So we've got 6 sheep, 8 sheep, and 10 sheep all stored away within the separate pens. We've not got any left out or divided unequally. This way that we've actually got the correct answer, but I think they could have made it much easier for us to really understand. That's the actual output we're getting back. Now let's come through to ChatGPT 5.1 thinking and ChatGPT 5 thinking to see how they deal with that specific problem. As we can see here, we've now got the 2 responses that came back. Overall, I think the left with ChatGPT 5 actually give us a bit of a better response back. We've got a simple and easy to understand final answer, put 3 sheep into 2 pens and 2 sheep into the other 2 pens, because then we've equally distributed the 10 sheep as we need. Whereas with ChatGPT 5.1 thinking, was each pen should have either 2 or 3 sheep, specifically 2 pens with 2 sheep and 2 pens with 3 sheep. I just think purely off reading it quickly, that response that we got back from ChatGPT 5 is definitely easier to be able to understand. Now, I think one of the easiest ways to demonstrate the difference in responses between ChatGPT 5 versus 5.1 is that age-old test where we're going to ask it to come out with some brand new ideas for maybe a social app, a product, anything like this that we could then sell. We asked it to come up with 10 fresh, non-obvious product ideas for a social app. No features that already exist on major platforms. Each idea must be surprising, creative, and feel like something humans would actually want. Because as you know, ChatGPT 5 and previously used to just come up with random ideas that you wouldn't actually want to use or understand how you could even implement it in the first place. The last part was including one sentence explaining why this idea is new or different, be inventive, non-generic, and good suggestions. So, what did we get with ChatGPT 5? Well, we got relay lists, create a tiny chain where each person adds on one item without seeing the rest. When the chain completes, everyone gets a sealed bundle and a map of how it traveled. Again, that's quite a strange idea. I understand that a high level they may be going after, but I wouldn't really want to see that as a user at the end of the day. In comparison, the first suggestion from ChatGPT 5 actually sounds quite reasonable. Each morning you're paired with a stranger who shares your routine, night owl, parent, shift worker, and you both answer the same 5 oddly specific prompts about your day. What did 11:17 look like with text or photos? At night, you see a side-by-side timeline of your 2 days, then the pairing disappears. This is new or different because it focuses on one-day mirroring with strangers rather than ongoing connection, feeds, or chats. So a little bit of a unique idea there. I don't think that's ever been done. Let me know in the comments below if you see any of these that actually are. What I've also noticed as well is that naming convention that we get back from ChatGPT 5.1 is much easier to understand than some of the ones from ChatGPT 5. A great example of that is where we've got borrowed time maybe is close to micro favors clock. So we've got borrowed time, a nagging task, and a 15-minute window. The app pairs you with someone doing their own task and runs a silent shared countdown with a tiny pledge at the start and a proof tap at the end. You never chat, just co-compute and move on. That's why why it's new is because it's turning accountability into anonymous, synchronous micro rituals. The micro favors clock, this is where we're going to list 10-minute favors you're happy to do for anyone. Name your newsletter, pick an outfit, rate your photos. When you have a spare moment, you spin the clock, your app matches you with someone pending a favors request, and you complete the structured response. This is a new or different approach because it treats social connection as a stream of one-off anonymous microfavors instead of ongoing chats or social graphs. So you can see it's got similar ideas in some sentences for the responses you're getting back, but I think it's much easier to understand what we're going to need to do with the ChatGPT 5.1 responses versus the ChatGPT 10. Let me know if any of these sound quite interesting, and we can always see if we can vibe code some of them to life. I still think they're a bit out there and probably not one that a lot of people would want to create. But then in fairness, we did ask for a brand new, fresh, non-obvious product idea that you could bring to life. So, who is ChatGPT 5.1 for? Well, I think for a lot of people out there, you're not really going to notice the major change in intelligence unless you're really pushing it with coming up with ideas and more of that creative side. You really do start to notice the difference. It may just sound warmer for the response you're getting back versus more the robotic one that we had with ChatGPT 5. Overall, I think it's really interesting to see how OpenAI is really trying to bring that personality to the forefront, exactly like Claude with Anthropic have been doing incredibly well up until now. So that's a quick overview of ChatGPT 5 versus 5.1. We're going to be going in much more depth around the latest AI releases from all of the models in the future. Make sure to come across to the community if you want to learn more about AI and automation, whether it's image generation, NA10, or anything else. Stay tuned for more around AI, automation, and have a great day.